I represent Allied in US. So we have, alongside me, we have our team, which has Imran. Imran is joining us from UK, then also Tariq. Just to introduce myself, and we just go. I guess after me, Imran can go in. But I'm an application architect. I've been working for different consulting firms in US for the past. I think it's been 13, 14 years now. Been working predominantly on the Microsoft stack, and then basically been started with SharePoint, and then went on with Microsoft Power Platform. I've been working on that. Uh, let me have Imran introduce himself as well.
Sure, thanks. Thanks, Abdul. Hi, so my name is Imran. Again, in terms of experience, I have around 15 years of app dev experience, and I've been working on Azure for the last 9 years. Again, from application design, development, infrastructure, and DevOps point of view. I have done various application migrations onto the cloud, various application assessments in the past, both from the point of view of scalability or moving the applications onto the cloud platform. So that's it from my side.
Okay, my name is Tariq. I have near about 14-year experience with system side and then cloud architect. I'm working with Azure from last 5 years since it's they changed the name from the Windows Cloud to Azure. And my primarily goals are with the securities and compliances and architecture and design diagrams and reviews. We are working with cloud technologies like DevOps, like Office 365 products.
Perfect.
Now,
all right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
go ahead. Sorry.
TrackLogix. So I think most maybe I've had conversations with, but I'm the Chief Technology Officer for ContractLogix, was on the founding team. So, of course, I pulled in Jeremy Harp here for this initial part of the kickoff for our Gen1 platform, which is really a fairly small footprint for our legacy applications. So Jeremy's our Director of Information Technology here at ContractLogix, and likely will be driving quite a bit of the Gen1 discussion overall. So, today there'll be mainly just us two involved. Any follow-up stuff, obviously we can, work towards whatever information you require. But, obviously during today's call, we expect to get into as many questions, topics, overview as needed. And then we'll take more time throughout the week as required to kind of work through the full Gen1 package, if you will.
Okay.
So I don't know from your perspective who's going to actually drive the questions, the discussions, and the arc review.
I can start off with at least, if you can give us an introduction to the Gen1. That will be, because I think I've seen the documents. I just want to see the application itself. So if you can just introduce it to us, and then we can have follow-up questions.
So Jeremy, do you want to do that driving and sort of walk them through that, please, at an overview level?
Yeah. So I'll show the application a little bit in a bit, but the application is basically, it's a web service that's hosted with a clustered environment using Appian as a middleware as a web service, and using a SQL database in the back end. The client itself is a thick client that installs ActiveX controllers for the Appian layer layer, and also leverages Word and a few other plugins as well that are built into the product. Yeah, I'm sure you guys seen the architect. I'm gonna share my screen real quick.
Sure.
And Jeremy, I sent the documents out to them, so from an architectural diagram perspective, I think they have a solid, diagram of that at least.
Yeah. We got
Can I just can I quickly mention? Sorry, I have started the recording of this session as well. If you guys are okay for this, it's just for us to replay this for help us with the documentation. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yep. No worries.
Oh, that's perfectly fine. If I get here we go. Okay, and everybody see my screen?
No, I can't.
Yeah, I cannot as well, Jeremy. So.
Okay. Find out why.
Yeah, now I can see.
Well,
It just came up. Yep.
So it's just a delay. Okay, let me get it back up. Oh, it's shared a window. It's not sharing the full screen. That's what let me get it to share the full screen. Screen 2. Okay, you should see an arcgram right now.
Yes.
Okay, so I'll bring the app over it. The app can only run in IE.
Okay.
And that quick little flash it's downloading the ActiveX controllers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it uses an Appian third-party Internet Explorer plugin that's an accelerator for the thick client.
And now as it's loading, now it's actually the screen's kind of hiding it, but it's caching everything on the local machine. As it's building the screens, it caches everything on the local machine in the app directory. So this
is that whole ActiveX control the entire thing?
Not the entire thing. It's just to get to the communication layer between the app server and the database.
Yeah, so for clarity there, the application is written in Power Builder, and then Appian, the middleware, converts the Power Builder code from Power Builder to .NET on the fly. That's what the plugin in the middleware, the Appian Enterprise Server is, which Jeremy can show you here shortly. And so what you're seeing here is the Internet Explorer browser running through that accelerator plugin through the Appian middleware, converting the Power Builder code, in other words.
Correct. This is the app. So this is the app. I don't know if there's anything to see in the app, but I can pull up the middleware now as well.
And this is reachable to the to your clients outside from the internet. Basically, I can see the URL there.
Correct. Yep. They have to know the username and password, but yes, it goes that one specific IP address. And also, I'll show in a little bit. It runs a web service as well for other plugins, but this is the third-party software. Or, it kind of you get your sessions, resources that it's using, data sources, and this is where you set up what we call cache names.
Essentially tenants.
Tenants, yeah. And they're all go to SQL database that's directly tied to this app server. The SQL server is not accessible from the outside world. It's only internal at the data center.
Okay.
Now, on top of the regular app, we have what we call the request modules. Is basically a portal to enter in simple data from the from a web form and post and submit a request into the core application. This is completely web based, all built in .NET.
Yeah, it has a very basic API web service to obviously receive and sync the data, etc.
Correct.
Okay. So this is the main login screen that we're looking at the moment for
This
the
is
end users.
mainly strictly for this part of our app. So let's take a step back. So a few moments ago, Jeremy, if you could go back to the regular link too. So this part of the application, if you open up open up the contracts or the search screen, this part of the app is actually Internet Explorer running the Power Builder version of the code through Appion middleware. And so this is a full-featured CLM system. It's our legacy product that was built and designed in early 2000s. And it will allow you to store information, documents, et cetera, all within the database. And it's full-featured with tons and tons of stuff. One of the requirements for our customer and user base, so outside of this part of the solution, the issue here is to use the main application that you're viewing, you must install the Internet Explorer plugin or accelerator, the thick client. Many of our customers, however, have a lot of external people. They might be out in the field, and they cannot install the plugin because of a variety of reasons. It's security, it's whatever. So the secondary application Jeremy was just showing with the login screen strictly is a .NET app that sends requests from this web UI for anyone to log in without installing the thick client to the main application that you were just viewing.
Got it. So you build almost like a facade on top.
Yeah, in practical senses, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Like an ancillary side module, if you will. But yeah, definitely built on the same, structure, if you will, the same database.
Can I just check the certificate, the HTTPS? Is that not valid, or why is it saying not secure here?
I would have to look into it. I'm using a test system too, so I'm not in a production environment. So.
Okay, you're in a test environment. Okay. Sure.
Now there is a limitation though in relation to that for TLS 1.2. This is TLS 1.1.
Yes.
So that's a known risk, and it's partly because we're migrating all of our customers to obviously our latest platform, which we'll review later on in life. But that this is one of the issues. It's a risk. It's a security vulnerability because of PCI, DSS, things of that nature. Some of the standards we have to comply with from a new product perspective, although it's not really necessary. It is applicable for the old product, but a lot of issues are known risks, which is again why we rewrote everything.
Okay.
Correct. And like Tim was talking before, we have a set of APIs that are tied to it that the application, the request module itself, the request portion, uses heavily. We only have one or two clients that use some of these calls, but we do have the API calls that request module and some of the other web services in the application use.
So how much do you want to view from a product perspective? Are there specific questions like blob storage of the doc, how we store that in the database, or do you have specific things you want to work through?
Yeah, so I mean, from Gen1 point of view, obviously we need to understand the the clients, the users, how they come into the system. So this is what I think what you're showing is perfect. The login screens, the how they authenticate, and then how the authorization works. I think some of the screens you just shown where you could see data sources, SQL, and I believe you log in as a super user, right? So what do you have as in terms of authorization rules? How do you manage and control those? And you just mentioned, so we'll focus on this part. Initial part of this call is the clients that hit this application. And you just mentioned web services. So we would like to understand the clients who call these web services. Again, what do they use in terms of security as well? So let's just cover that first, and then we'll move on to the other areas.
Okay. One thing more, I just want to check, is there any third-party trust in between, like SSO? Are you guys receiving any SP, service provider initiator, and these type of stuff, or you are using your own authentications?
No, we do have SSO integration and EDFS integration capabilities. So I'll show you that real quick before I show you the roles. Users. So this is a basic user setup where you put the for all the users. This is where you assign on the request account. It keeps on popping up on my other screen. Sorry. So put inside your request information. You copy user. This is where you set up your emails. So you put in your email server information to connect to, so you can receive and or send. Most of the time, send emails, but you can also receive emails. Auto login, which is a feature that's pretty much obsolete unless you have a scheduler. Will auto log somebody in based on a local domain. So you can set that up if you have LDP set up correctly. We have our SAML integration, which is pretty much this is our SSO integration at the same time. It looks like none of the users are here set up. Yeah, there. So these are several different types of SSO that are set up for these easier to use, and we got the URLs and tokens, whatever's needed to go from here.
So I can see even you have Azure there, Azure IDP.
Yes.
Yeah, so this is for SAML. So with SAML, yeah, it supports the Azure IDP.
Yep.
You are using Okta as well?
Correct. Yep.
Now in Gen1, obviously we can support IDPs that support SAML. And the reality is, again, we don't phase anything new because this is a legacy product. So our new product supports a whole host of IDPs as well, but this one is sort of limited. So that's SAML. And then we also support AD as well. So in this example, this will actually authenticate against their local AD. One thing to note, because this is running a thick client, and that thick client is installed on their local machine, of course, what ends up happening is authentication will be done from the thick client or the local machine to their AD. So from a technological perspective, it's not like today's APIs or IDPs, really. It's using the local machine and host to actually go out and do that. So that's fairly limited AD settings because of that, but it does support that as well.
So this user base and their local setup, are they internal to Contract Logics, or are we talking about third parties as well outside?
This is third party. So this will basically look at the third party computer that the thick client's installed on and actually work like they're always behind their firewall. In other words, so we don't actually use this internally at Contract Logic. So this is applying to any end user or client's tenants. So any one of our customers, they would set up these settings, and it would basically reside on their local host, if you will.
Okay.
Yeah, and all these settings can be completely different from tenant to tenant.
Okay, I see. So in terms of they authenticate locally, and the authorization also happens locally for them, what they can see and what they can't. So at what point does the application from their machines hit your backend infrastructure?
They will when they hit the login screen. Once they click the login screen, that's when they'll start pulling data from the database. Once they log in, because you can either log in through the SAML AD or the login, or they get that login screen that showed up when I first got into the application.
Yeah. Okay.
Then for user level, you can set up e-signature services as well. Integration with Certify or DocuSign.
DocuSign, yep. So this is setting up users. Now there are also Jeremy and utilities. If we open up the password policies from an app perspective.
Yep.
So when you look at, like, in terms of authorization, you have your SSO and SAML integrations, you have your AD. We also support just strictly username and password. And when you have just username and password, you would be setting up your policy within this legacy app. And here's the minimal policy requirements that are required for the old platform.
Okay, so there's like a password strength and all that. That's okay. So and the actual password storage, where is that kept?
In the database itself.
And so in terms of the location of that database, where is that?
It'll be in the data center.
Okay, with the rest of the app, basically. Okay, we'll look at the app stuff. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. It's saving as a plain text, and which type of format?
It has a hash. It's being saved with a hash.
Okay, so in this case, as per my understanding, your credentials and passwords are storing in your databases, and the users are using their login accounts and the passwords, right?
Correct.
Okay.
And is that like a self-service, or do they have to do like a support ticket with you guys to?
They forget their passwords. They either talk to their admin of their system, which will have full rights, or they'd have to call our support team.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. One thing I need to check with here. Is this totally SaaS-based services? Are you guys also providing the client-based, CP-based, like client provision devices?
Yes, for this platform, there is an on-premise version that they have, which is they put their own web service and their own database behind their own firewalls, and they don't go out to the internet. They keep it locally.
Yeah, so we support
in this case,
client server and an on-premise web, which is what you're looking at. The on-premise web is essentially the exact same middleware and the exact same solution as what you're looking at. The only difference is we sell a license for their local servers. Right, so they install everything and maintain everything as a customer. We don't actually sell that anymore. That was a long time ago, but we do have customers still on that model. This review, though, is more pertaining to our software as a service, which is applicable from a infrastructure perspective, which is what Jeremy's showing you.
Okay.
Okay.
And as far as I'll go over web links real quick so we can show you how it relates. Here's where you would define the URLs for the web services. to which one the app, so and the application knows where to go when you set up the web services. If you haven't even turned on, sometimes you don't even they're not being used.
Okay, so we talked about users. You also mentioned like web services, the page you were showing. So how does the client applications talk to the web services? What's the security layer over there?
They're sitting on the same server, and they're either using the UPI or doing the API or doing direct calls to the database, doing the shared database through the .NET. The security itself was set up. You have to put your log. It has its own login security. Let me see if I can get to it.
Is it like a web key, Jeremy?
Yeah. So here, you have to set. They have to have a web key to be able to use the services, and these are in here. They're set to you can set them to expire, whatever your policy is. It's the same thing with to access the API, and you have the ability to integrate directly with Salesforce as well.
Okay.
Okay, in terms of SaaS-based solutions, the current model is tenant-based, or it's a mixed environment? Like you create a tenant for each organization, for each client, or it's just a random, you create the users and all that stuff?
Yeah, so the URL will be the same, but everybody will have their own database, and they'll have their own tenant ID, which is like this chip_prod is the tenant ID, this particular tenant ID.
Yeah, so to be clear, unlike a lot of SaaS systems today, the old product does not tokenize or do anything. You have to know the tenant ID. In this case, he's using a test one called chip_prod. Without that ID, you're not going to gain access to your app, because it's actually generated. Well, it was generated by ContractLogix staff using a naming convention. And so normally a tenant ID might be, I don't know, HSC1238, right, with a combination code of the customer name and the customer ID. So to be clear, it's you are creating individual tenants, to Jeremy's comment about the database and etc., but it has to be known and applied to your URL to gain access to it for the main application.
Yeah, so you can see here, that's the chip_prod tenant inside the AEM Appian Manager, the middleware layer. This is the data. This is that tenant, and this is what the data source. And we specify exactly what data source, what database it points to, and each one is different.
That's so the data layer is different. So what about the compute layer? Do these tenants share the compute layer, or do you spin up new servers for each?
No, they should share. It's on one server, shared on one database server. A lot of the compute stuff is done locally on their machines through the thick client. It's mostly just sending.
Sorry, Jeremy. Yep. Go.
I was going to say it's just the sending and receiving of the data that's usually done through the database server and through the app layer.
Yeah, and the only other point there is we do have 2 clients or so, or maybe a couple clients that do have dedicated environments, as you could see in the infrastructure diagram. The reason being is some clients want a wholly separate, logically separated storage systems, etc., and that's something that we charge differently for. At this point in time, we have very few of those left on this infrastructure, though.
Yeah, 2, be exact.
So typically, that's not the case. Normally, it's just their individual tenants with their own logically separated database, etc.
Yeah, and each of these databases have their own encryption key as well that's stored in Key Vault, Azure Key Vault.
Encryption key for do you encrypt all the data?
Yes. It's
Okay,
well, it's
so
at rest. Yeah, it's using that H yeah, it's HKY or something like that. I can't remember. It's the hardware encrypted key through Azure, ASMAC key.
Oh, the HSM from Key Vault?
Yeah.
Yeah.
okay, yeah, that's good. Yeah. So your core business logic, obviously we talk about the data and the storage and the encrypted. That's good. Um, and then the client, the thick app. So where does the actual business logic reside? Is that primarily then on this thick client applications within the clients, or is it there is a web service? Is web service layer really pure data transfer? No logic involved?
Yeah, it's pretty much data transfer. Most of the logic is built. It's either it's pulling data blobs out of the database to like build the screen, construct the screen, but all the rendering and everything is being done on the client on the local user's machine.
And any business rules that you apply, any business logic that's also downloaded locally.
Correct. Yep. It's all stored in the database and pulled locally. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not really a business logic layer outside of the code itself, though.
Yeah.
So when you look in terms of like splitting that and separating the state of that architecturally, this old solution doesn't separate it. It's all part of the code, and it does explicit operations, in other words.
Okay, I think this bit would be interesting to see how this compares with the Gen2, but I think it's fine for now to continue. Yeah.
So right now we're covering authorization and some kind of high level things in relation to encryption based on that noted. Are there other things for authorization that you want to work through?
So we talk about authentication, and then from authorization point of view, who can do what? How do you manage that?
Okay. Yep. I'll show you in a second.
So earlier you had asked the question, when do we switch to app level? So Jeremy, you're going to get into more of the security side?
Yeah, the role painter. Yeah.
So, the authentication side of it, we don't pass any groups or any permissions really outside of contract logics. Everything is full role-based security. So all permissions are defined strictly within our application. And so this is what Jeremy's opened up here. We have security roles. You can create roles, copy roles, delete roles, and pretty much where it says role settings and module, all of the related functionality throughout our product has various controls. And you can get granular or you can get less granular, but all the functionality, it's very, very purpose-built controls for this Power Builder app. So all this was done in Power Builder, in other words. And this is where you would control all the system level permissions.
Correct. And you got different types, so you can break them down to different contract types. If you want to break them down, you're down the level. You can do that as well. You can do that based on status. Who can see what status as well based on that role. And the same thing with the to-do list, which is just pretty much a dashboard. This is also where when we were talking request module, that's where you got this in here. That's in here as well. If I scroll down, I can find it in here. I should say request somewhere. Yeah, so this is the thin app. So if you need access, how to get access to it, it's either you got access to it or you don't. Web form approval, same thing. If you're able to approve those requests. So this is where that request module is pulling the permissions from here, from the same database, but it's all controlled through the core app.
Okay. And in this service model, obviously you're managing this, and the client again makes a request,
Yeah,
and then you.
the client themselves will be managing all of this. We would train them we'd train one of their, what we call a super user. We'll train them how to be their admin and configure this based on their needs. We'd assist them with the configuration. Usually the only time we help them is if they lock themselves out of the system, then we'll help them get back into their system if their admin had left the company or something like that.
Okay. And obviously there are these rules then drive these roles, then drive, who can see what and what operations they can do in the data, right? So when we looked at the web service, you mentioned there's a key API key. You can still see it in the screen. So that web service client then has a full CRUD access to entire DB, or is that web service access also limited to what each endpoint can do?
It's limited to, I think it's wide open to I think the data space connection is wide open. I haven't dug deep enough in it to know, but I believe it's wide open.
Yeah, it's not a CRUD for the database anyways, and it is it's authentication based API, so sort of a little bit old school. It's not, it's very basic in its nature.
Correct. You use this API key here. So it has to create the web services. Actually, you do have to have a token, a login token. That login token is actually created as a combination of this API key and a username and a username and their level, their role. So it's those three combinations actually generate the actual token.
Okay. So if a user can't delete a resource, they can't delete that resource through this route as well.
Okay. So, yeah, because it has to have a combination of the API key and the user information. It has to be matched and to able to connect to that system. And it's just I think it's a DB2 encrypted token. Only a few people know how to generate that token outside of that system. Actually, I'm the only one left, to come to think of it.
Okay, I think that's fine. So Tariq and Abdul, any questions you have from security side of things, authorization or authentication, any other?
No, none from my side.
Just want to check the things which is regard to the authorization level, as they are also using the on-premise model for the appliance. And in this case, it's totally isolated from their environment. Or they also receiving the request from their side?
If it's on-prem, it'll be all within their own environment. It'll work the same way. Instead of going through the internet, it's just going local into their own intranet instead, internal network.
Unless they open it up, obviously, on a DMZ, whatever they decide to do. But we don't have control over that part of it. So in our infrastructure, we have a DMZ, and we have a web-facing side that allows the requests and the API calls, but on customers, we recommend that, but that's totally up to them and how they set it up.
Okay.
Okay. So if we just move on from our list, so we again, this is I'm looking at the list, Tim, that we went through during the proposal of what areas we're going to cover. So security was the top one there. I'll quickly mention the next 2-3 items, and we'll go through them one by one. So
one question real quick. So this is on the app side. We're also going to go through all of that again on the infrastructure, correct? we'll cover that part of it as well.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point. Yeah,
I
should we
don't know
look
if
at that
you wanna
now
do it.
from
Well, I don't know, Jeremy, what's your thoughts? I mean,
No,
because
I
I
could,
want to focus a lot of time on the infrastructure, because that's the side of it that I think, we want to dig in. This gives you the flavor of the application, but it's a legacy app. So from my perspective, most of this should really dig into the infrastructure, I think. Setup of that, how we do that, how that looks, all that kind of fun stuff.
Sure. I'll just very quickly mention the bullet points that I had, and I think, and then we can obviously, we can add stuff to it, or if you think it's not going to cover. So I had security, I then had points around scalability, availability, which I think we are moving towards infrastructure there. Performance, I had SDLC automation, hosting, again, containerization, virtualization, if you're using any network setup, accessibility, and then we had some cross-cutting things like logging, monitoring, configuration, backup, recovery. So I think, yeah, pretty much most of this list takes us to the infrastructure side. I think you're.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure, but yeah, you can keep asking away, Jeremy. We can keep going through the app because it's open. That's fine. Whatever you feel is best, of course.
well, I got it open. I got it open so we can jump back and forth.
Sure. So one thing, Tim, I should have asked at the beginning of this call. It's slightly out of order, but if you don't mind, can you give again for the for the other members in the call as well, just a very high level of what this app is about? I think it's something we should have started the call with, but I thought let's just go, if you don't mind, just giving us a very brief overview.
Of course. Yeah, so the application that we're looking at is our Gen1 legacy contract lifecycle management solution. The whole solution was back then, obviously to provide contract lifecycle management using on-premise and sort of quasi software as a service type of deployments. And this solution has housed a lot of large global brands with a lot of documents and data correlated to the contracts. The system itself, we are phasing out this solution entirely because it is legacy, and we're transitioning our clients to the new Gen2 platform. But this platform, really is quite basic. As we noted earlier, it's essentially Power Builder converted in middleware to a web client, and on the SaaS and on the on-premise web side. Really, the focus of our review is the SaaS side more than the other solutions. So in a nutshell, there really isn't that much else, from our super high level, what this app does. As we go through functionality, it does do things like generate documents. It stores, obviously, documents. It OCRs and redlines documents. It opens up a Microsoft Editor to view Word documents and redline them. It does search capacity for searching your documents or your data, but most of that's just simply application level functionality. The main reason for the ARC review is obviously from an infrastructure security, downtime, maintenance, performance, scalability. We're trying to minimize this infrastructure even further. And now we've added one more thing in the mix, is migrate it. Because we've moved, I want to say, at least 50% of the customers into our new product, even over the last months. So the whole goal here is to literally minimize this to zero footprint and have most of these or all of these customers on our new platform. So that's a real high level. I don't know other details that might be helpful.
No, I think it's really useful. And when you say contract and the whole contract management, is it that probably it's about like templates and people edit contracts and there's a workflow approvals and finalizing contracts. Is that the whole thing that goes through various?
Yep. Okay. Exactly. Yep. and we do contract intake. So the request functionality that Jeremy was showing, the request module, we call it, that accepts almost like you're sending a request, or the system is ingesting the contracts from throughout an organization in a thin client manner. Whereas most day-to-day end users, they're leveraging the solution for, obviously managing key metadata, managing the documents, redlining, workflows, approvals, but they're also doing things like full reporting capability, email notifications, things of that nature, so they never miss anything important related to their contracts.
Got it. And in terms of signing, you mentioned DocuSign. Is that what you integrate with, or you do your own signing solution?
We integrate DocuSign, Certify electronic signature, and also Adobe Sign, which is formerly EchoSign.
Okay. Well, that's very interesting. So okay, I think we'll now go through the remaining list, and obviously as we now go through the list, what we would like to understand from your point of view is also the challenges, the normal day-to-day challenges that you currently face with this. Like we talked about security, but what challenge do you think? I think when we go through each of these, for example, the next point is scalability. So with each of these points, we would like to understand from your point of view, what challenge you faced around that particular area. So in terms of security authorization, have you had, what are the pain points at the moment from this?
Well, I'll let Jeremy kind of get into the bulk of this, but with Gen1, obviously it's a legacy platform. So we do not develop in Power Builder and use the Appian outside of our customer base that's already using it. So while we support this application, any changes to modernize the security protocols or to update from TLS 1.1 to 1.2 is a significant challenge because of cost, because of we're not going to develop it. It doesn't make financial sense to develop it. And so there's significant, flaws in that type of model because simply, again, we've pretty much halted. We only do support. We don't do development on the platform. So it's certainly outdated and it doesn't meet every security protocol. Now, you guys are aware we are, because of our industry and the types of customers, we have customers in banking and finance. We have healthcare customers and hospitals and health systems and pharma and energy and all these kind of things. So from those verticals perspectives, most of those clients have selected to bring the application on premise because we can't meet all of their requirements for SOC 2s or all of that for hosting it to the standards that they would need. With that said, though, this facility, we actually host this at the internet facilities. And so our data center SOC 2, but the application can pretty much never be SOC 2 type 2 or meet every single regulation that we require. So from a security perspective, in terms of that, we are getting application. So we support obviously SOC 2 type 1 and 2 for all of our data centers, and even type 3 for Azure and whatever. And that's all the data center side. But Contract Logics, we have a third-party QSA that we're going through our SOC audits literally as we speak. So we already have our type 1. Our type 2 will be done and completed in the next month and a half or so, 2 months. And we're in the middle of that. But we're also doing FISMA. We're doing HIPAA. We're doing an ISO 27001-002 mapping as well. And we're also doing our SIG as well to map all of our controls to one master document as part of these processes, and also PCI DSS. Now, the last challenge I'll note, one thing you should be aware is this application is deployed and customers have full control over the data. So contract logics, because it's encrypted and we don't have access to their solutions unless they grant us permission, we don't actually see their information. And a challenge is that we are getting PCI DSS because we're not aware of all of the data they're storing. They may or may not be storing personal information or personal healthcare information or, things of that nature, even credit card data as an example. And because of that, we are getting all of these standards and going through all of the audits that are applicable to us as a business. And that's a significant challenge with this old app. What I want to ensure, though, is these challenges, at least from a controls and a infrastructure perspective, we don't, have any outstanding remediation issues, because obviously that's critical as a business to having integrity as we go through what we need to do. So that's the security challenges from my perspective. Jeremy, how about from yours?
Yeah, that pretty much sums it up. I mean, the other thing is just making sure we can, we're going to have to migrate or reduce the footprint of this application. When we do that, we want to make sure we have opportunities infrastructure-wise to make it more secure. We want to make sure we do it, and if we can, without having to do any development on the app. So.
Sure. And this is obviously for the infrastructure that you control, that you run, right?
Correct.
What's with the customer is out of the control anyway.
Of course. Yep. Exactly right.
So is there a timeline as such to move everybody to Gen 2, or some of the clients will stick with Gen 1 because of what you just mentioned, the banks, and they might not like the cloud as such.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'm gonna half answer it because it's a loaded question. But basically, our preference would obviously is like yesterday. So our goal is by mid 2021 is our preferred goal. And between now and that June of 2021, we want to consolidate as much of this as we can to reduce the footprint and obviously migrate it to the cloud for the software as a service solution. That does include some financial services, banking. It does include some hospitals and healthcare, and it does include other global Fortune 500s. So ideally, obviously we're just starting a very aggressive push to migrate all of these customers off of this platform, because we have a huge, very different security model today than we did back then. So challenging question. I do believe there'll always be a handful of customers that take longer, whether it be because of complexity, or maybe it's Kinder Morgan as an example, and the largest pipeline company in the world. Well, in that regard, they may be the end of 2021, but I don't expect more than, but most of those customers, I believe, are on-premise customers, so it really shouldn't impact this. Make sense?
Okay. Yeah.
Perfect.
Correct. Yeah, and to go back to the main point before we wrapped up kind of the security on it, one of the biggest challenges that we have right now is email settings. I got the email settings set up here. A lot of companies now, policy-wise, won't allow their users to configure their emails in other clients. Like we need it for our system to send emails and stuff. So a lot of our 90% of our support tickets for this product is email issues. A lot of that stems from, their servers can't talk to ours. We're using too old technology, so they have to make an exception, stuff like that. They won't allow their users to put their user information in here to connect to their server. So we have an alternative email relay. That email relay is on old ISS technology that doesn't support anything over TLS 1.0. So those are the challenges that we have, the biggest challenges we have, the biggest support issues that we have ongoing repetitively. The other out of the last 10%, 5% of it is just people moving their servers, they're upgrading their servers from 2012 to 2016. stuff like that. The other 5% are just simple usability issues because their super user that originally set up the application left the company.
Now, the other thing is it's on Internet Explorer, so if anything, that in and of itself is a huge security flaw and vulnerability from our perspective.
Correct.
It's thick client, using ActiveX, which is super easy to, create problems, hack security-wise. So those are pretty big, implications. And our goal is if we can manage and consolidate the infrastructure and lock it all down as to the best of our ability, make it as redundant and monitored in performance, all that sort of stuff, we'll be okay over time to reduce the footprint and, just do this as correctly as we can. But, there are known limitations, like we're not going to develop it, et cetera. So that's the context behind some of the challenges around security anyways.
Okay, I think so. I think the email issues that you mentioned, I think that is something we can potentially, like maybe discuss a bit more in detail. So you mentioned about using a relay service. So have you used I can see there in the settings that you were showing was like your own SMTP configuration for outbound emails.
Correct.
So so do you get like challenges where emails get blocked and all that as well, or what?
Well,
yeah, not from us. It's more from the client trying to run it, because they're trying to run it from their domain, from within their infrastructure, but it's going out to our application to send the emails. So that's where they run into problems, where their IT departments have to be aware that they have to keep us whitelisted. And sometimes somebody does an audit and decides to flip the switch and block us again. So that's a lot of the challenges that we run into.
One more consideration. There's an architectural part of this. So originally when the application was designed, because it used a thick client, it would have an EasyMail DLL on the local system, and that would allow the customer, the user, to use our system with their actual end user POP or IMAP or other email settings. In the system, because it's thick client, would actually act just like Outlook would on their local computer.
Yeah.
So what Jeremy just described is when you use our SaaS product and you try to enter in the same POP settings, etc., or IMAP or whatever, it will obviously still try to work like on their network, but an email relay is required with the whitelisting, et cetera, for that to actually work correctly.
Yep. And because I had the relay set up in that email setting, I try to hit the email manager in our application to do what Tim was talking about, use the local machine, and it just crashed the system because I don't have it set up. I'm using the SaaS version and not a local version. So I have to log back into the system.
Okay. I mean, we've so have you considered using like a cloud email service, like Office 365 or something like that for outbound emails?
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things that we have 6 clients that are using the email relay right now, and we're looking for an alternative for that. We use SunGrid for the other product to do all our email handling. So we're looking at options. We just haven't got. We just know we started looking at options. We just haven't dug deep into it yet. But it's on one of our top priority list, and to come out of these conversations, that is one of the goals we want to get, is to figure out a possible solution for that as we consolidate this infrastructure.
Okay, well, that's interesting. So I think we can now move into the infrastructure bits. So starting from what we have is the scalability and the availability aspects of the platform. So maybe before we go into this particular thing, it'll be good to have that. I think you have a diagram open here anyway, to give a very quick overview of the bits of infrastructure, and then we can go into the each part.
Okay, so so this is the production environment. Everything comes in through the public internet. Obviously, it has redundant firewalls. One's in each different data center for redundancy, and we get the same thing with the load balancers in case for failover. The load balancer, and all this is just for the production environment. The load balancers do not exist for the non-production environments because it's not needed. From there, it goes into what we call the Enterprise Appian cluster, which is that middleware, the Appian middleware that sits on two web servers. So it splits the load between two different web services. Then obviously they share a database. We have two databases. We split the loads through that Appian connections that I was showing you. We split the loads manually on which clients are on which server. The exception with the load balancer in production is the SunGauge. The SunGauge is a special client-only system that has their own app server, own database server, because they replicate everything 100% of Iron Mountain for complete DR failover for their requirements. The other special one is the Starbucks app, which is they have their own app server because they have to restrict everything by IP address.
Okay, so you have two special cases, one for Starbucks and one for how do you pronounce this? Cengage.
Correct.
And the rest, all of your other customers are in these shared infrastructure.
Correct. That is correct.
And in terms of so where do these boxes physically exist?
These are all virtual machines sitting in our tier 1 app data center.
So when you say your data center, is it like a service you've got from a provider?
Yeah, it's through 5 tier 1 point provides the data center services and the disaster recovery service, which is from INAP.
Okay. Now, in terms of the, so I'm just looking at this. The web services, web servers. Now, in terms of the load, is it? And you mentioned these are VMs. So, what kind of size are we talking about here? So, unless it's already mentioned here, yes, four CPUs, 8 GB RAM.
Yep.
So they're not like heavy machines. So in terms of the load, what's the typical utilization of these resources?
I'm not 100% sure. We don't get warning messages, so they're not hitting the 65%. No.
Okay, so they are below 65%. And do you get any in terms of patterns of usage? Are there any peak times or?
Yeah, the peak times. Yeah, the peak times are usually between 12 p.m. and 6 p.m. Eastern time. That's when the peak hours, when we get the highest volumes, Monday through Friday.
And even in those, they haven't hit the more than 65% resources.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, in the old application, the way that we use their system to do all the processing, on the app side, we don't, there's not a ton of the resource constraints, but the data side could be a little bit different, Jeremy.
Correct.
In terms of how that's working. So to be clear, when you're looking at CLX App 01 and 02, those application servers, we split the load. And historically, when we had many hundreds of customers on them or multiple boxes, it would have been a different story. But nowadays, there's probably 85 clients that use the two different boxes load balanced, and the app server was never overly intensive outside of really just managing connections, because a lot of that we push to the thick client processing.
Okay, interesting. And in terms,
we just the reason we have two app servers mainly for redundancy at this point. It isn't because of, it's just to meet our redundancy requirement at this point.
Correct.
But in case of Starbucks and Cengage, they don't get that redundancy. Is it a single VMs for them, single point of failure?
Yeah. They both can be, if there was a major failure, there's going to be significant downtime. They both can be temporarily switched over to the original SaaS environment with a couple of clicks of a button.
Okay, and has that happened in the past?
No, the only time it's happened with Sungage, we do DR testing with Sungage themselves, but they cut over to their Iron Mountain instance for their DR
That's
testing.
test reasons only.
Correct.
We
never had to do it in a production necessary instance.
Okay. And then going down to the databases. So now just walk me through the resource here and consumption and the usage. So it says 50, it's a slightly small print. Let me just get the version I have. So it's a 50 something GB RAM.
Correct. It's 32, sorry.
32, sorry.
Yep.
The screen size was like that. 32 GB RAM, 4 CPUs. So what's the resource utilization here?
CPU wise, it averages about 55 on a normal day. The DBO1 is about 55. DBO2 is about 45 on an average day. Now, the memory usage is always high because it's SQL Server, so it just consumes as much memory as it possibly can at any given point in time. So it's hard to measure. But it's never
memory during transactions, or no?
What's that?
Do we do any DBs in memory when we do any transactions, or no?
No, we don't.
Okay.
And the biggest challenge that we have with these machines is storage. Because we have a limited amount of storage, right? We only have 1 terabyte available. So the logical, the data files and the log files are stored in the same device, which causes some conflicts once in a while. And that's just because of we don't want to invest money to double in the storage for these devices. And it was not set up efficiently from day one. So it's just part of the resources if we migrate over to something new that we'd pay attention to when we set up the new database servers.
Now, in terms of like the transaction activity, when I say transaction, I'm talking about rights to the DB. For example, from a contract point of view, somebody's trying to save a contract or move to the workflow, and then maybe some people are doing lots of reads. Some other users are just trying to retrieve data. So do you get that issues at all where a write to the system fails, saving fails, something like that?
Usually very rare. Sometimes we do. Usually the errors we get are connectivity issues, where it's just, or we have a bad index for one client. It affects that one database, but does not affect the server itself.
I see. And how do you find out about the indexes, the bad indexes?
Usually I'll log into we get a support request. If it's a SaaS client, then I'll turn around and just run a trace on the database, on that particular database, and work my way backwards from there.
Got it. Okay, that's interesting. I think one thing that I can't see here from this diagram is how the network is set up, like the VLANs and the communication between the app layer with the database layer. Do you have that level of information available, details?
Well, I got kind of the IP addresses in here. I could kind of explain it. These blocks here are actually firewall blocks. These servers can only talk to each other. They can't talk to anything else. And it's just the SQL port that's open.
For private connection?
Yes.
And how do you get to the SQL to do your, for example, index analysis? And so how do you get in?
So that's what I was brought up earlier. Stay logged in. So this is the firewall virtual office VPN to it, so I can get to each machine. So I'll go into the DB01 machine.
Okay, so
Yeah, and I VPN into it. Yeah, and it's two. I have to get authorized for the VPN, then I have to log into the machine. So it's two authorizations I have to go through to get here.
and it's a point-to-site VPN, right? So it's set up on your machine. Is it set up on any other machines, or is it?
No, it's not point to site. It's actually just a URL.
Oh, okay.
It's all cloud based. So
Got it.
Gen1 it's called Virtual Office. It's provided by the Dell Sonical.
correct.
Got it. Oh, there you go. Yes, there's Visual Office there. Okay. And from the security of the network point of view, obviously you have these VMs. Are these running on a dedicated physical hardware for ContractLogix, or is it a shared physical hardware?
It's dedicated hardware for us.
Okay. So to dedicate, that's one thing. And the networks, the VLANs, you said the apps can talk to the SQLs, and it's locked just for this, right? Nobody else in their environment can. Have you done any sort of penetration testing on this to validate that?
Yeah, we do vulnerability scans on it, and we've used to do routine penetration tests. I know Tier 1 does them themselves, but I'm looking at software to actually start doing the internal ones myself again.
Yeah, strictly for this platform.
Correct.
So we've done, obviously, just to meet our standards as a company, we do ongoing vulnerability scans. We do pen tests not less than once per year. We've done multiple pen tests on this, application. I don't know, at least twice a year for the last few years, anyways, based on our policies. But that has recently changed to once per year based on major release. And then also our third-party provider, which is now Thrive, used to be Tier 1. They have their own requirements as well from a vulnerability scan and also a pen test perspective.
Okay. And was there anything that came up that you thought needs addressing?
It's the biggest issue that keeps on coming up is the TLS 1.1 is 1.0 is still enabled, and 1.1 is still enabled. Enforcing HTTPS as well is the other big thing.
Do you want to send them the report, Jeremy?
Yeah, I can do that.
We can send you the actual pen test report that this will show up on in vuln scans, etc. So you have that. We have understanding of the costs and the requirements. I think a lot of this is the middleware, so we're not going to take steps, and it's a known risk and whatnot. So we'll provide you the info so you have it, though.
Yeah, I'll send.
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'll send the pen test for both platforms right after this call.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay. So, going back to the area we're trying to cover is scalability, availability, and performance. Now, correct me if my understanding is wrong here. The impression I've got is that in terms of scalability, you don't really currently have a challenge, and you're not adding a lot more customers to this Gen1 at the moment, right?
That is correct.
Correct. And scalability will be more for the Gen 2 platform. However, in this environment, it's more about, appropriate consolidation, but still meeting the right performance requirement, right? So we actually want to scale it down a bit, I would say. Jeremy, correct me if I'm wrong.
Correct. Yeah. just like this, like we have this right here, this third database server we're using, SQL Server 2016 as a test. That is no longer. That's actually getting faded out, where it's going to be shut down in the next 30 days or so.
Especially like when you mentioned like over the last few months you've moved 50% customers out. So I guess the load is decreasing on this, right?
Correct.
Correct. Yeah.
Mm. Okay, and from from performance point of view, I know you in terms of response times. I mean, have you had any challenges there, or have you done any performance testing on how long it takes to do a response, for example?
We've done some, and most of the time it says latency based on location of where our customers are. But other than that, it's pretty static. It's always slow because it's a thick client, so it takes forever to render and pull the data down on your machine, then render.
So is it the pulling the data that's slow, or is it the actual rendering that is slow?
The actual rendering.
Yeah, it's probably a little of both. I mean, frankly,
Yeah.
it's not optimal, from a, DB data retrieval perspective, and it's also certainly not optimal running Power Builder through a .NET, converter, if you will. So I think both of those are very slow. Obviously, in an ideal world, we want to ensure that our customers have the highest performance while they're on the platform, but obviously try other techniques to manage cost optimize, and reduce the footprint over time. There's only so much we're going to be able to accomplish there, of course, but those are all considerations on the table, I would say.
Absolutely, I think that's a fair point. And then the availability point of view, I think your shared infrastructure has a highly available, but I guess Starbucks and Cengage doesn't. But you mentioned that they haven't really had an issue.
Well, let's talk about that. We've only had, and Jeremy, again, I'll rely on you. We've had one single instance of downtime outside of normal maintenance for this infrastructure for years, and it was a DNS related issue, or maybe it was a key issue. What was it?
Yeah, it was a key. There was an encryption key issue expired. The API for Key Vault expired.
So we haven't had downtime except that, and that was a cluster, but and it took quite a bit of resolution. But the reality is,
and that was only one database server; it wasn't both. So
yeah, and this has been relatively bulletproof for what it is, but we're going to have to change it to do the right thing and whatnot. So
yeah, I think that the last incident before that was 2 years ago, when pretty much the whole East Coast lost internet service, so it really wasn't anything we could do.
And
now, I want to make sure, because I only have through 5:30 today schedule wise. Obviously, Jeremy, you can continue if you have time or if the team has time. Yeah. But I want to make sure we end and start and end on the right topic. So by all means, you guys don't have to stop for me. I just happen to have a call.
No, I think it's fine. We have another session planned to cover this, Gen1, and I think we should be able to cover this in those two planned sessions. And so I think, and then from the same, we can discuss the related topic, which is I can see the replication arrow going down there, the backup and recovery aspects. So obviously, in terms of the disaster recovery, so what do we have here? We have database replication at the moment, and what's our, so let me put it this way. So what's the RPO and RTO, recovery point objectives and the time objective? If this data center, if tier 1 goes down,
8 hours and 4 hours.
8, okay, perfect. 8 hours and 4 hours.
Yep.
For Gen1, it should be 8 hours and 4 hours, respectfully. Yeah.
Yep, that's what it is.
Okay, and so and then in those 8 hours, you need to bring back the from the replication. So is it a hot replication, active? So what is the replication? It's a SQL replication.
It's it replicates the VMs actually, the entire VMs.
So it's image based.
Yeah.
So we actually take snapshots of the image, store them to the offsite TierPoint DR facility, and then we also replicate, obviously, the data side. So in the event that after a 4-hour period of triage and validation, if we know it's going to be down for any extended amount of time, we flip the switch. It's not a true failover in the sense of hot. So what will happen is we'll flip the switch, make the decision, and then the DNS, all that will propagate, and it'll be on within our response time objective.
Okay.
Is this automated SRM, site recovery management, or it's a manual?
It's manual.
Manual for this application.
Okay.
And on the other side, do you get the again the load balancer, the web front end, and the back end? All of that gets running. You only need to do a flip of DNS.
Correct. We just got to do the flip of the DNS, and that's it. Everything else is handled from the data center's point of view, and it's all replicated, and all the hardware is mimicked in each location.
Okay.
Yeah. And so the architectural part of that was done actually. So they're one and the same company. The only difference is our main facilities for the production environment is at Internap, and then the TierPoint being a DR. But we do kind of a managed service with that MSP which is now Thrive, but used to be Tier 1. And they actually designed both architectures and the DR to be kind of purpose built for what we needed. So really just a little bit different context, because it's not like two different vendors manage it, if you will.
Got it. And just for the history, have you had any such incident where the DR was triggered?
Not outside of tests. We do different drills, DR and disaster recovery testing at least once a year as part of our continuity and incident management programs. And, though that's the only time that's ever been triggered is that correct, Jeremy?
That is correct.
Okay, good. Okay. And then in terms of the backups and restores, like regular backups and restores is it do you have separate backups of this databases, or do you rely on so what's the backup strategy? Sorry, there's a high-level question.
I can send when I send the documents over, I'll send over our backup policy. They'll have the frequencies in it.
Okay.
And basically it's like intermittent every 15 minutes. There's 24-hour long terms, there's full days, and there's weeklies and there's monthlies for this product.
Okay. And in case the customer does something, where they've accidentally deleted something, is that for your SaaS offering, then do they raise a ticket and you have to try and recover the data for them, or how does that work?
Correct. Yeah, they'd submit a ticket to us, then we'd submit a ticket to Tier 1 to have them do a restore. Then we would switch. We would actually then once the restore of the database files are complete, we'll swap the files out on the database level.
Okay. And do you provide how many years of data you save for them, or do you have a limit to that in terms of time?
We usually 3 months is our usual max.
Okay.
We never gotten a request to be over 15 days. So.
Got it. Okay. I think I've covered my questions around this. Again, Tariq and Abdul, any other questions around this area before we move to we'll also got limited time now, but I'm just thinking what we can cover. Any other questions in this time?
I think you probably have covered most of these important questions. So I'm good.
Okay. I think so. What we'll do is we will resume in our next session. There are more areas in Gen1, especially around logging and monitoring, some configuration aspects. But I guess we have covered, I think, majority of the things in this session. So anything from your side, Abdul and Tariq?
No, I think I'm good. I think we can resume it tomorrow then. I think tomorrow.
That's great. And then tomorrow, I'd like to actually dig into a little bit of the server side as well, from an infrastructure hardware side, to kind of go through some of that config. Whatever's going to give you the greatest picture and information, that'll be helpful. Jeremy, you blocked the time, right?
Yes.
Awesome. All right. So,
and then I think before I think we close out, I think important thing is, if there is anything that we are missing, if you guys can think that's an important area where it's, there's something that you want us to look into, definitely point it out. Of course, we have our structure, we have our points jotted down, but still, anything from you that will be very, very helpful, actually.
Yeah, and Jeremy and I certainly aren't bashful to throw that out there. So no big deal.
Definitely not.
The big deal is just making sure we have ample time to actually go through some of the config and talk some specifics. So it'll give a little more technical aptitude. I think today was good overview wise. We covered a lot of topics, but I want to try to connect more of those dots. So we have the time blocked tomorrow, and I know there was a session that Michelle was looking to schedule for Friday. I was the one who couldn't commit there, but we can definitely make the availability tomorrow and even as needed Thursday and Friday for Gen1 to make sure that we cover every angle. Perfect. And the only other piece I'm throwing in there is the consolidation side. And then one that's more recent that I think we can get at in a little more depth is secondary DNS. I'd like to cover that topic in relation to this and, just general domains as part of this, simply because that's an area that we need to improve on. So again, we'll let you know those topics now that we got a feel for, how you go about things for today.
Okay, appreciate it.
Awesome.
Thank you, guys.
Well, thank you very much. We'll look forward to tomorrow. And other than that, let us know if you think of anything related to the first couple topics. Shoot us a note, or we'll talk about it tomorrow. But other than that, thank you guys very much.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jeremy, just if you can kindly share the pen test results, please. That'll be great. Thank you very much.
Yep. You'll get them shortly.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Oh, thanks, mate.